Hello everybody, how you doing this evening? This is Thursday night. I'm doing my lesson tonight. On Thursday, had a busy week. We got a lot going on in the month of January. We have a lot of birthdays and stuff going on. We have anniversary. We have things like an intercession. Like first it's Christmas, and then the next week it's New Year's, and then the next week it's our anniversary, and then tomorrow, which is the 15th, is Isaac's birthday. And my mom's birthday was yesterday, the 13th. She's born on Friday, the 13th. And then on the 19th, it's Louise's birthday. So everybody's birthday's in January except mine and Alex's. And then we have our anniversary mixed up in there. So we've got a lot of celebrating going on in the month of January. And it makes things a little busy. And so we want to talk about celebrating tonight a little bit too in our lesson. Last week, we were talking about how Obadiah was going to tell different things of catastrophes that were going to happen. But this week, we want to talk about how good things are going to happen to the Israelites, the people of Judah. They were captive in Babylon for a long time. And then whenever they were taken captive, God promised the prophet Jeremiah that he would... there will be a 70-year captivity where they would be held captive for 70 years in Babylon. And then during that time, Babylon was overtaken by the king Cyrus, king of Persia. So he took over Babylon, and then he actually took over everything that Babylon had. So he had the Israelites under him. So anyways, we're going to talk about how God does really neat things through people when we don't really know, when we least suspect it. And then we talked about the power of prayer last week a little bit. And a lot of people don't realize what prayer can do. Prayer has a lot of potential, and that's our strongest weapon as a Christian against evil is prayer, because it sets the Holy Spirit in motion, and it allows things and allows God to do things. And so, you know, a strong prayer is a lot stronger than a sword in this case. But anyways, King Cyrus had taken over Persia, and God gave Cyrus an idea. He said, Cyrus, let all the people of God go back to Israel, or back to Jerusalem, so they can rebuild their temple and live in the land where they did before. And so this came to his mind. And so, yeah, I think that would be a great idea for the people to go back to their own country again. That would be pretty neat. So I want you to think a little bit about, what if you were born, let's say your parents moved to, let's say, Spain, something like that. And you grew up in Spain. You're maybe as old as you are now. And then your parents says, well, we're going to go back home wherever we grew up. We got to get back to our homeland. So you pick up everything where you knew what home was, and you move back here into Big Valley, let's say. And so everything's new to you. Everything's foreign to you. You don't understand the culture. Culture's so different from Spain than it is here. And you see a horse and buggy for the first time, things like that. And it's just like totally different from what you're used to. And a lot of the people are that way too. Remember, he told Jeremiah that it was going to be 70 years. It was 70 years since they were taken captive, and then Cyrus is going to let them go back to their homeland again. And so, whenever they did that, Cyrus told the people under him to give the Israelites, the people of Judah, like gifts of gold and silver and animals and everything, things that they needed to start over again, because they didn't have anything. And so they were let to go back, and so they're let out of captivity and free to go back to their homeland again. You think about how we were kind of held captive a little bit here this summer. We had this pandemic. Actually, it was this spring. We had to stop going to school, stop going to church. We had to stay home. We weren't allowed to go anywhere. If we did, we had to wear a mask. And even then, we weren't even allowed to go to some businesses. Some businesses shut down. Some of your parents probably weren't working, or the ones that have their own business weren't able to do their business. And so it's kind of held captive in a way. And remember how nice it was whenever you could go back to church again. I was wondering, remember how nice it was to see all of you again whenever we were able to go back to church again. And then we got back to captivity again, and here we are again doing it online. But anyways, it's always nice to get free and back to where you were again and be able to do the things you wanted to do, be in the places you wanted to be. And so you got to remember it was 70 years. So these people were like most of the people that were grown up now were just really little kids then, and you got to think 70 years, if they were, let's say 10, then they're 80 years old now. So I'm thinking that's a long time. I'm not sure how long people lived in that era. I was thinking back to after Noah, they're up to 140, 150 years, some of them yet. But I don't think it was quite that long now. But anyways, so, the ones that were really, really young don't really remember a whole lot of what their homeland was, but some of them did. And then you have everybody that was either born there or, were babies when they were taken that don't remember the other thing, kind of going back to a place where they never even knew of. So they were going to be going back. The king of Zerubbabel was the leader at that time, and Zerubbabel was the grandson of King Jehoiakim. He was the one that was captured by Nebuchadnezzar and back into captivity because he was an evil king, and they didn't. And that's why God allowed them to be taken captive, because he fell away from them. How many times have we talked about that now, when Israel fell away and then held captive, and then they got out, and then they go back into captivity because they forgot about God again. And so, whenever we forget about God, we lose our protection sometimes. Remember, we talk about protection. And God, he wants to help us out, but he's not going to force himself on us. We need to choose him. And, Jeremiah says, choose this day, or is it Joshua? Choose this day whom we will serve. And like I said, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. We choose to serve God. And when we choose to serve God, then we can allow God to do great things. But if we choose not to, then, he's not going to force things on us. And so anyways, they got back and they started to set up their houses again. And then the priests started to rebuild the altar. Of course, the first thing that had to be used is the altar. And then they followed the laws of God for the building. When the altar was finished, they did burnt offerings, so the thanks and praise, prayer offering for God, praise offering for God. And they had a festival like they used to do, of unleavened bread and all that, and they made sacrifices. And they're just going to do things the way they're supposed to do, go back to the old ways. And I'll talk about that a little bit now, a lot later, about old days now. But anyways, then God's people gave money to stone cutters and people that were very good carpenters and were able to really do good, really nice work to prepare things for the temple. They paid people to bring cedar logs and things like that, because that's what Solomon made the temple out of. And so they started to work, they got everything ready, and they laid the foundation. The foundation is the most important part of any building. And, if you don't have a very good foundation, then your building isn't going to last very long. So whenever they built the foundation, the priests put on special clothes and the people praised God. Okay? They sang, "The Lord is good, and they are faithful and love will last forever," their song said. And they shouted and praised God, and they were very, very happy. But not everybody was happy. Some of the older people, like I talked about, remembered the old temple and how it was 70 years ago. Now, remember, they were just young then. They weren't really old. They weren't really ones that made the decisions not to follow God. They remember the temple the way it was and all the good things that happened there. And they had good, fond memories of the temple. And then to see all the beautiful things that were done with the temple and how it was built was all destroyed was very hard to see. And so, because you could never make anything exactly the way it was before. And over near where I work, and it's actually the farm where Isaac works, over Evergreen Farms, they had a barn fire over where they keep heifers. So they have many farms and many barns. It wasn't where the main dairy was, but it was where they had about 75, 76 heifers. All the heifers got out, but the building was totally destroyed. And it was a very unique barn. It was a really old barn. It was, I don't know, maybe even a couple hundred years old. But it was just a really fascinating barn when you looked at it. It was just really cool, really neat how it looked. And Isaac was in it a few times. He cleaned it out and things for the heifers because that's where he worked. And he was just saying how nice it was. But anyways, you know, I don't know, they'll probably rebuild it, but they can't make it exactly the way it was. And so that's kind of a heart wrencher too. Because you remember, these people, it wasn't their choice, the choices that they made because they were young that got them put into captive in the first place and seeing the temple destroyed. It was their parents and their ancestors that did that. But they're the ones that had to suffer for it. And now they got to go back and rebuild and start all over again. And so it really was upsetting. And they said that they cried, and the noise of the crying and shouting was so loud that the people could be heard from far away. I don't know how long I know you guys can scream pretty loud. If you're in a basketball game or a baseball game or something like that, and all of you scream at one time, you know, I know you guys can get pretty noisy in class sometimes. It's kind of hard to settle you down sometimes, but, you know, we can make some noise either when we're very happy or when we're very sad. And these people were pretty sad, the older ones. But the younger ones are really excited. This is something new. They heard about all this stuff. They heard about the temple. They heard about the sacrifices and praising God and what all the wonderful things that God did. And they couldn't wait to see what God was going to do in their lifetime. And so there's mixed feelings. There's just all kinds of different feelings there. And so I want you to think a little bit about, you know, have you ever felt disappointed when things didn't work out the way you quite wanted them to? Like girls, if you like to bake, and you're making cookies or brownies, you know how good brownies are. And something just didn't turn out quite right. I don't know if you remember, I made some brownies or something, and I forgot I forgot to put something in or put too much of something in, and it didn't taste right. But then you remember I made some snickerdoodle cookies, and I didn't have this one ingredient, and Louise said, well, we can maybe use this, but it was it wasn't what she thought it was, and how bitter tasting the cookies were. So anyways, like I said, there's sometimes we do things and we feel disappointed when they don't work out right because you want them to taste just right, and you want things to work out just the way you want them to, but they don't always. And so through this celebration and through this sorrow, things got made pretty well, and they got settled in. And so I just want you to know that, you know, they wanted to do things the right way. And Solomon built the temple, and he did it, you know, he used the best of everything because it was for God. It wasn't for him. It wasn't his house. It was God's house. And so I want to talk a little bit about building God's house today, which is in our hearts. And I want to refer to the parable of the people that built their house on the sand and the people who built their house on the rock, because it's pretty important today about where you build your foundation for what your temple of God was going to be. Because if you build on the sand, but you don't really build your faith on God and really spend time in the Word and spend time with God, and you just kind of go about your own way and forget about God like the Israelites did, whenever trying times come along, you know, you're going to kind of get washed away. Your temple is going to get washed away. But if you build it on the rock, you build it on God, and you really take time out for God, and you really know the scriptures, and you take time to pray, and you really do your best to show God's love through your heart and all that you do and wherever you go, you know, then you're a pretty solid person. Whenever tough times come, you're going to be able to withstand them. So I want you to understand now that if, you know, the way things are going today, our church is being persecuted some because we're not allowed to meet. They're calling it the virus. We can't meet for the virus, but there's some restrictions that are tougher than they don't need to be. You know, let Walmarts will be able to open, and bars can be open. Things like that can open, but churches can't. And sometimes when we have leaders that aren't following God, want to try to suppress the church because of whatever reason. That's how Satan uses people. And so, now that we're not really meeting very well, or on, it's some people are getting a little lazy and so it's kind of nice just to stay home. We don't need to go to church and we don't need to listen to it on the live stream or whatever. And that's kind of what happened over the years. The church got a little lazy and we're kind of falling away from God. And now everybody's thinking we have these turmoil in our government and stuff right now that God needs to bless America. We need to have God bless America, but should he? Because America is kind of falling away from God a little bit. Our church got a little lazy. We hadn't been pushing things, and we allowed things to come into our country like abortion and things like that. And we're not allowed to have Bibles or the Ten Commandments or anything else in the courtrooms or our schools or anything like that. And so why would God want to bless America if we're kind of leaving him out of America? So I want you to think about that, because your faith could be tested even when it's young. But now's the time to build that strong point, because you're building your foundation now when you're little. And then the rest of your temple for God will be built strong. So hopefully maybe next weekend we might be able to meet. But I think we're going to try for that. We'll see how things work out. But I sure hope so, because I can't wait to see you guys. It's just such a joy to see you and have you in my class and just be around you, because it brings so much joy. But anyways, you have a great Sunday. Have a great next week. I hope school's going well for you, whatever way you're doing it. And I just hope that you have a great, this great winter too, Lord. So thank you. God bless you all. Hopefully we'll see you next week. Take care.